All right, bro. So we were at church earlier, and I had a burning thought. Why is it important to have a faith-based mindset?
What's going on, guys? It's your boy Beatsbyash, back at it again with another banger of a video. We are once again at the Untouched Value podcast, the only show made by Gen Z for Gen Z, built to uplift your lives and careers. At a certain point, it feels like when the internet started taking off, that a lot of people started becoming at least less open about their religion. And there's a couple notable differences that I've found that come with a religious background. And I tend to think that nowadays I get along a lot better with people who have a religious background. And I think that's because it brings a sense of community. Those people on average tend to have more family and community oriented morals.
Yeah.
And that's very important in order to develop one of the biggest resources going forward, which is trust and reliability. You know, without having you here, I wouldn't be able to make this as much of a success, and we would not be able to grow at the rate that we are going. Would you agree?
I agree, brother. I would say the biggest thing that I peep whenever I see religious communities is they have very consistent belief systems. Like, you'll talk to somebody that maybe isn't religious, and I'm not trying to knock on them or judge them, but they're just a little all over the place. They think this is wrong. It might be a small thing, but this is right. It's a big deal. It's very refreshing to be around people who are consistent in their thought patterns, beliefs, morals. It gives you a better parameter of what you know is right and wrong. I believe that every person on this earth, whether they do a minute little thing or a big deal, they can justify it and lie, but you know what right and wrong is. And then I think that's one of the big things that being raised in a faith-based background, you just know right from wrong. It's very clear and cut to you from a young age. You know, you hear the stories of Joseph or Cain and Abel. You get a very good barometer of what's right, what's wrong. Develop that with your daily relationships with your brother and sister, making friends, how to treat your elders, little things like that. As you grow up, it becomes a lot bigger of a deal. That moral attitude is going to translate into being able to foster more important relationships with your boss, co-workers, maybe one day if you're a business owner, employees. People are going to respect you for standing on your own 2 feet and saying, yeah, let's try that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Would you say that it's fair to think that if we both have a religious background, even if we're not the same religion, that it's easier to see where our boundaries have consistency in what we think is okay to do and what's not okay to do?
Bro, there's like scriptural differences, you know, when it comes to life principles.
Yes.
It's very similar.
I always get along very well with people of a Muslim background. I think that the Muslim community is very strict about how they live their life in a certain manner, and it's very well understood, you know, what those consistencies are in their life. And so I understand how to like approach them, and they know how to like, you know, interact with me. It's such a high commodity nowadays to develop trust in the people you want to work with and the people you want to be around. If we're going to the same community, if you did some bad stuff to me, I don't know that you would feel comfortable going back to that place, because then everyone would kind of know. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. When you're in school, let's say you're in 3rd grade, right? You steal from a kid in your friend group, maybe at the playground. Well, all you got to do is just not go back to that area in the playground. You go to a church or a synagogue or a mosque, you do wrong by somebody, what are you going to do? Just tell your parents, like, oh, I'm not going there anymore? Like, it's different. You're tied to those people. I think they're good people to be around. It's probably the best environment to raise young children. I don't think it compares. Like, when you see unruly kids, being in a church type environment is very beneficial.
That's a great point about the playground. When I think about the religious community, since we both graduated high school, a lot of that dips out. We both went through COVID. You know, that was a big part of my college experience, and that took away a portion of that community. It's difficult for me to find people that are my age to engage with, decide I want to develop relationships with them. One of the best ways that people in our community feel like they can meet each other is through some situation where alcohol is a byproduct of being there. It can be difficult to like meet new people our age from like a righteous standpoint. If you were going to church consistently and being actively involved with those groups, I feel like you would have more of those relationships.
Yep.
But to play the devil's advocate, you got to think, I personally wouldn't say that college I haven't continued those relationships with a lot of those people I met. And that partially has to do with, while I did meet a lot of people in our age group, they weren't necessarily from a common standpoint where we were both interested in the same activity, same reason for being there. Because some of those people I did meet because they were at a party or a recreational setting where we didn't necessarily have to have anything in common because we were just indulging in, a hedonistic lifestyle. And when you're indulging in a lifestyle like that, it's very difficult to continue those relationships. And so that's where I would say that even if you are in college, if I would have went to church consistently at that time, that even if I would have met less people overall than college, I would probably continue more of those relationships, Let's just say a book club. It would be easier to foster a relationship after that because we have like a similar interest, or something like that. And I just think a lot of that has been lost by social media. Now people are more reluctant to meet people. And for me, I want to meet people, not just relationships with the opposite sex, but with friends from the right place. That's something I think about a lot. Did I meet this person for the right reasons? And we kind of touched on this on one of our previous episodes about substance. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you go check that out. But one of the main points we had was with weed or any kind of substance, you enter interactions and relationships with people that you would have not normally ever became acquainted with them if it wasn't for that substance, which isn't necessarily a good thing. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like when you have religion or any type of community, a book club, let's say you're involved in like bicycle, like cycling, something like that, then it's easier for me to say that person has a different level of consistency on our ideals together rather than us just being involved in some hedonistic activity where it's like, I really don't know what your values are. That's where you can get involved with people that maybe the person doesn't do anything seriously bad to you. Let's say they just do something that kind of hurts your feelings or, makes you feel like you weren't valued as much as the relationship. And I think when you enter those, you kind of have to expect that because there's a certain amount of like variance or chance that you have in those relationships.
Yep.
Whereas if you meet someone from a good place, you're kind of mitigating that risk in a way. At least I would say.
You nail it right on the head. So, to expand on what my friend here is saying, in most religions, there's religious buffers, okay? I think it's really ironic when you find people that maybe had a 5-year relationship with a girl or a girl with a guy, whoever it is. Like, we've kind of heard it, like, they effed me over, they did all this stuff, like, after the relationship's over. Or maybe you just have a casual friend that, like, just wasn't a good friend to you or, like, did a bunch of retarded stuff. And then you, like, ask them how they met or, like, kind of expand on their relationship. And you're like, yo, they met each other at a bar, or like they met each other at a frat house. Like, you know what I'm saying? They didn't meet their like significant other or their friend in a place where there wasn't any buffers. I mean,
yes,
everybody's drinking and having sex with each other and experimenting with drugs, and then they're pissed off at how the relationship went and how things spiraled out of control. Well, you met them drinking, you met them doing some hedonistic things. Like, you can't expect a whole lot of productiveness, like a fruitful, productive relationship to come out of that. I mean, it's kind of hilarious to me. Whereas in a church, synagogue, mosque, religious temple of some sort, there's buffers, there's boundaries.
Or at least you can't be surprised when something doesn't go the way you thought it was because there aren't those understood consistencies there. If that's a better way to put it,
Yep.
Because it could go well for you, but you just don't know. I think everybody has one of those friends that they entered a long-term relationship and they kind of disconnected from their community and you kind of just see less and less of them. And sometimes whenever that long-term relationship ends and it doesn't end the way they would have liked especially, it's hard for them to become more integrated back into that community that they once had because, you think about it, let's say hypothetically, we had a person in our friend group who was very close to us, both of us, and they kind of disassociated themselves from the friend group. And after it's over, well, you and me are going in a different direction. And we've stayed connected because we're kind of aligned by, similar purposes. And that person wants to get back in. Well, it's going to be more difficult for us to trust them. It's going to be difficult for us to understand that they're coming from a righteous standpoint because they lost that integration from the community. And I think that it's really nice about religion, because if you're in a relationship with someone, a serious one, then that's one of those community-based settings that you can both go to together. And, you think about it, if the relationship ends, well, you still have that community. You never lost that integration. So then even after the relationship is over, it's easy for you to be, introducing yourself to new people and making new connections, because you never really lost that. Because you might have a partner in your relationship that doesn't want you to spend all this time with these friends that you had before, but really, your partner's probably going to be, willing for you to, still go to church, because that's something that you can both be engaged in. And I'm not saying, all relationships are like that, but my main point is that, let's say you're in a relationship with a girl and you want to go do all this guy stuff with us. Well, she may not fit into that. She may not want to be a part of that. And that's where she gets disconnected from the community. But that's one of those things where it's you both have similar consistencies to this one purpose, this one community. And that's not divided by what sex you are,
Yep, I agree. I think, and a big reason this question popped into my mind is because a lot of people did grow up in faith-based backgrounds, but they strayed away from that path because, I don't know, life got funner, I guess. I don't know how to explain that part of it. But there's a lot of varying factors. You start questioning things. You start, experimenting with drugs, alcohol, women, and you kind of start straying away from that path, not going to church as much. And then when something drastic happens, you're back in the church, you're praying, you're reading the Bible. And I think I just wanted to do a little podcast on the fact that you can also utilize, these spiritual backgrounds for more than that. It's not always can I get something out of this? Sometimes it's how can I provide value? How can I help out? And in return, there's always going to be a value trade-off. Every seed that you sow will sprout something of some sort. But yeah, and then let me go pull up this another question.
100%. And I would also like to say that when you're in a relationship with someone, let's say your partner isn't even the same religion as you, if you guys both stay connected to that religious buffer, in a lot of ways, I would like to think that it's going to strengthen your relationship, because the people in your church are going to kind of be reluctant to incentivize you to do wrong to that other party, And you see a lot of relationships end very badly, and a lot of times one of the partners has no remorse for what they did. And I think that at least if the relationship is going to end and you're a part of some kind of religious setting, no matter what religion you're in, I feel like you're a lot more reluctant to end it on very bad terms, because, that buffer kind of incentivizes you to act in a higher moral standpoint.
Makes it very hard to be sour about things.
Yeah, and that goes into the fact that, religions of all kind of don't condone a hedonistic lifestyle, because they're built on a ulterior purpose, a greater purpose than what's just happening now. And I think that can be really used to strongly increase the strength of your relationship with your partner. And that's just always something to consider, because you want to set yourself up for success. And that's what we're all about here. So that's what we want to talk about today.
Yep. And then the last question I have for this, because that's kind of the relationship building part of it, is I believe that, and I might have a differing opinion from some of you guys, but I believe that we have a purpose here. Everything does happen for a reason. Now, I'm not just saying that in the vein of, oh, do whatever, and if something terrible happens to you, it was going to happen anyways. No, I'm still saying, make the correct decisions, but more along the lines of when you have a really mundane day, boring day, you don't think you have a very important job, sometimes you can really impact somebody or some type of thing. You can impact it a lot more than you think in your head. So that's kind of what I'm saying when, everything happens for a reason. And I believe that when you're in the church, you're reading the scripture, whether it's the Quran or the Bible, you're going to start to find out what God's plan is for you. what is your purpose in life? Where do you fill in? What's the biggest role you can serve? I think that's a huge thing as well, you know.
For sure. And I'd also like to say, I bring this up a lot with people who I'm trying to cultivate relationships with, people who go through depression and sadness. Something that a lot of people don't know is that there have been studies done showing that in America, this is one of the only places in the world where if someone is depressed or sad, and America has the highest rate of depression or sadness than any other place, those people will typically try to fix those problems and those areas in their life by doing something for themselves, and in some ways is more hedonistic than other lifestyles, such as if you were depressed, you might decide to get a new car, try to get a house,
Basically a Band-Aid.
try to develop your own self, try to get a promotion at work. Whereas in other countries, you'll see a lot of times when someone is feeling that way, they try to do something else for their other community members to bring them up. And that's one of the best ways that you can empower yourself, is by empowering others.
Yep.
And so I really want to hedge on the importance of community in your overall success, because we're all about, giving value to create value. And you don't need to necessarily go into the relationship saying that I'm going to get something back, but those things tend to happen more naturally on your own when you're coming in with a community-based mindset. Today we just had a very big talk about how I got him into start doing shorts for his channel, a lot of short form content, and then that ended up coming back to me where he was able to teach me a lot of things about like short form content, what's working for him, and add value back to me. And I didn't necessarily come into that deciding that I was like trying to motivate him to do this so that I could get something in return, but that naturally equated itself. And I think that's partially due to the fact that we're both in that kind of community-centered mindset in our lives.
Yeah, that's a very easy example to bring up as well, the one he just said about the shorts. But there's also a lot of like subliminal ones, like very, like you might not even notice it sometimes. You might get like just intrinsic value from somebody. Sometimes it's not just like, oh, I tipped this waiter this much money, maybe I'll get tipped on my job. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not always going to come in the hardware form or, someone teaching you something. Sometimes it might just be very subliminal and subconscious that just it helps you out. Like you're not always going to get something, but it's never a bad thing to do exactly what he's saying and helping your other community members, whether it's family, friends, people in whatever club you're involved in, school. I think it's a very good thing to foster. And if everybody did a little bit more of that, we'd be in a much better place.
And I would argue that when you do something out of the good of your heart for other community members, it never creates pain or sadness for yourself. When you decide to, tip a waiter something that you think that they deserve, I think that it feels a lot better when you're in this mindset. And, this really goes back into what you were saying about how some people, they may enter a relationship or they just disconnect themselves from their religion or the community, and then they get back into it and they start praying and they start noticing all these changes in their life. And you're talking about how there's a subliminal, a part of that. And I think that from what I've learned from reconnecting to the church, reconnecting to God, I've started to notice these things more than before. When I didn't have this mindset, I didn't notice, the value that was coming from me giving value to others. But when you're in this community-based mindset, it becomes very transparent about what you are, outputting and what that's doing for other people. Yep. And that in itself is going to empower you and make you more fulfilled in your life and your purpose.
Yep. In short, there is not, you can't look at building a spiritual relationship with your creator, whatever religion you're a part of, or God if you're a Christian, as a waste of time, or how is this going to help me. You can't definitely can't look at church that way and the Bible, and you definitely can't think of other things that way as well. Like you never know what can help you in any type of way. You have to put yourself in situations that sometimes may be uncomfortable. You know, whether it's church at 9 o'clock in the morning and you're super tired and maybe you had to work the night before, those types of deals.
And I would say that value is transparent both ways. You know, it's not just transparent to me, but earlier in the podcast, I mentioned that I get along very well with people of a Muslim background. And I think that's partially due to the fact that, you know, religion is universal in the way that you were saying, in that other people see that what you're doing is coming from a good standpoint, no matter what religion you're based in, no matter what community setting you are in. And they're a lot more open to, you know, adding you to their circle and adding, you know, value to your life, because it's very transparent that way as well. And I think that's something important to acknowledge, because a lot of these people are going to be the most important people that you want to have in your life going forward. And it at least doesn't hurt you to have those values that are transparent to other people.
Basically, the biggest thing I think in my last point was it helps you become that much, you know, less aimless, whether it's impacting your community environment, like we said earlier, or your family, your spouse, your husband, your wife, children, those types of things. It puts up these, like, you know, guardrails almost on the road of life that you're on.
Yep.
Makes it very hard for you to stray off over here and take this side road and then take this detour that just wasted a bunch of time and maybe broke a tire or two in a, you know, spiritual sense. It just keeps you on the right path. Like, you stay focused on what matters. You keep the main thing. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, man.
Yeah. Guys, I've been cooking all day long, and I'm going to continue to cook. So before I go any deeper, make sure to smash the like button, turn post notifications on, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another banger. So I want to kind of go into something that's very personal to me when you're talking about, you know, not always knowing where your trajectory is and kind of being in an aimless mindset. I felt like a large portion of me being in college, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do before I got into developing my purpose and developing videography and my passions. And I think when you're more connected to a community, just like he was saying, it's easier to know where I should be going. And now that I look back, it's so much like, it's so transparent that if I would have had these kind of relationships that were based in a good place, I probably would have never been feeling dissatisfied or feeling like I needed to do more than what was given to me and what was available if I had been a part of this community. And I would recommend that to anyone who is in college, because you think about it and it's like, I've touched on this before. A lot of people go undecided. They may change their major. They may not know exactly what field they want to be in until they dip their toes in the water, you know, until they start understanding like what this is actually about. And I think your community can kind of shape where you want to be and where you should be, because now you're comparing like where you're at to those consistencies that are apparent to everyone in your community. You know, you think about that. Like for me, for example, I was in a fraternity and I was in, you know, like a group of people where I feel like the consistencies weren't that transparent. And we look at, after I just graduated, a lot of those people I'm still not maintaining a relationship with, and I don't really talk to them anymore. You know, there were a lot of people in my fraternity that I was very good with when I was in college, and I don't regret being friends with them. But I would say that if that community was even coming from a more religious-based standpoint, or at least a community that was, you know, very consistent with what I was trying to do and what you were trying to do, that it would be easier for me to uplift those people in the direction that they want to go. Because you think about it and it's like, you're in a fraternity, you're in a sorority, or maybe you're just in like, you know, a club and stuff, and you don't really have like that many similarities coming from like a based righteous place, you know? And when you are, that just, it becomes so apparent of how I can help you. Because, think about it. And the people in my fraternity, I didn't necessarily know what all they were about. And, I was kind of in a better situation than most because mine was much more smaller and I knew everyone's like name and a little bit about them. But some of these groups, they have over 100 people and they don't know that much about each other. And even if I did want to help you, well, I may not be that close to you, and I don't necessarily understand how to uplift you. Like, we had people who were all different majors. There was one guy in specific, his name was Tim, and I really, want to put respect on him because he's no longer with us, but he was a great guy, and a lot of people didn't really understand how to add value to his life until he was no longer with us. Rest in peace to him. And I really attribute that if we did have more consistencies between us, that I would have known how to benefit him, you know? And I think that, people like him, he really never even knew how much he benefited my life and how much he did for me until after he was gone. And those consistencies are, where it becomes apparent in what we're doing, because you have people in these groups who don't necessarily have a lot in common, and we're not necessarily brought together from the righteous place, That's where there are some of those religious groups where it's like, even if me and him are doing different things, I understand where our group, our community wants us to be, and I know how I can help him because I know what he's interested in, and I'm more connected with him,
Yep. It's like I was saying earlier, it's harder to stray off on the side roads, and you don't get in these. I mean, I think there's a Bible verse, idle hands do the devil's work, or maybe that's just a quote. When you're not doing the right thing, or you're not doing anything at all, and you're just idle, you're going to be doing the wrong thing usually. I mean, you're going to be straying off on the side roads, doing the wrong thing, and it completely wastes a couple years of your life. Where if you were in those constraints of a religious community, you wouldn't even have thought twice about it. And it's much easier, I think, in these days, because we walk on eggshells with what we say to people, just because of all the censorship and X, Y, and Z. I don't think we need to get too much into that, but sometimes if you just could just open up to people and be like, yo, what's going on, and then try to help them your own way, I think you could benefit a lot of people's lives, even your own life. But it's definitely made it a lot harder in 2023 with all of the censorship, people getting canceled, you getting labeled right out the box as soon as you say one thing as a bunch of things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that goes back to people who aren't connected through a real community. You may even just be connected digitally. Well, you don't really know where he stands. If he was doing something wrong, let's say he, got really into drugs or something like that. It's okay, he doesn't even have to be from the same religion. Let's say he was Muslim. Well, I know that his community doesn't, want him to be doing that. And I know how to help him. In the instance of my friend Tim, nobody really knew as much about him as we would have liked to. And I think that if we did, we could have helped him more. I could have understood where this person has deficiencies, because like I said, even if we're not a part of the same group, most religions, it's transparent about where they should be in their trajectory, and it makes it easier to talk to people, because some people don't even know how we should be approaching. You're talking about censorship and stuff, and people will nowadays label you for saying one thing because someone can just clip you digitally. But then you think about that person's real friends. Why do you think those are always the people who are defending that person? Because they actually talk to them. They know what they're about, and they know where their consistencies are. You could even slip up and say the wrong thing, but the person that's defending you, they're defending you because they know that's not actually what you were intending the message to be, And that gets wrapped up and intertwined with people clipping things and people misjudging you. Nowadays, people will, clip one thing about you, and you may take a lot away from that person and take a lot of benefits from them. But then people are just well, yeah, he must have taken away this one bad thing this person likes. And that's where it goes into, okay, I don't necessarily have to like every single thing about you. And people get that really misconstrued. And I really hope that you guys will, continue to create a better community and not judge people for liking one thing about someone, because You know, if you don't know exactly everything that one person is about, then you don't need to be judging them or judging other people for liking that person. That's how people get canceled. You know, there are some people, if you're just consistently saying, you know, outrageously like racist or hate crime based things, well then yeah, you might actually be a bad person. I can understand why you could be canceled. But if you say one thing and it's debatable, like that it can be misconstrued, and then everyone just pushes that person out of the water, you're actually doing more harm than good, because you didn't see where the value that person was adding to the world, and you just pushed them to the side, which coincidentally stopped other people from gaining all of the good things that that person was adding to their life.
Yep. I think it's I've always said this. I think it's very important for, you know, myself and everybody to form their own opinions on people. If you take what everybody has, you know, to say about somebody without a grain of salt or without a second consideration, you might screw yourself in the long run. You might have made a really good friend or a really good business partner, acquaintance, just because you just took someone's word for it. Oh, they said this about this person, or, you know, whatever, man. Like, you got to form your own opinions about people, because that's how you kind of, as you get older, you can kind of spot certain tendencies and, I guess, red flags on your own a little bit easier. You don't have to just depend on other people's opinions for your relationship building, which is why we're saying this right now. Being in a religious, you know, spiritual based background, or not background, but setting, is much better, because you don't even have to worry about this stuff. Like, your opinion really doesn't matter in those situations, because the relationships aren't built on what can I gain from this person, or can I sleep with this girl tonight. Like, there's no hidden agenda. It's just, we're all here for one common purpose. It makes building those friendships much easier, which in turn allows you to trust them easier. They trust you easier. A lot of weight gets lifted off your shoulders in that aspect when you're in those type of environments.
See, that's where those transparencies become such a key component to our success in society nowadays. People all the time say, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, I understand what the book is about. I understand what the Quran is about. I understand what the Bible is about. Even though I can't recite all the verses, all the passages from the different, you know, books and the different religions, I understand what place that person's coming from. And one thing I learned in my sales job, where I had to communicate with a lot of different people in a lot of different ways to be an effective team member, that I learned. You know, a lot of people can misconstrue the way you go about something. You know, I can say something to you, the exact same words as another person said it to you, but you may take it the wrong way just because your consistencies aren't transparent to me, you know? And to bring up a real life example, there was a situation in my work where basically there was a new manager, and this person was kind of harping on one of my coworkers that I actually knew him from high school, and he was kind of new on the job, and they thought that this person was doing devious things or that they had a malicious intent. And I basically had to go and talk to the manager and talk to my coworker in different ways and explain where they were coming from, because I actually knew what that person was about, and their consistencies were transparent to me, but it obviously wasn't transparent to this other person. And that's where you have to be able to communicate with different people in different ways to be an effective community member.
Yep. It makes it a lot easier. That's for sure. I mean, there's really isn't any debating that, but that's pretty much all the thoughts I had today, bro. Is religion, it's not always just about, okay, what can I get out of this? Like, you might be able to impact people's lives more than you could ever think. So give it some consideration, guys. Get into the church, maybe meet with some local pastors, or hit up your friends, see if you can attend some services or sermons on a Sunday. Try it out. See how your life improves. Give it a couple weeks, couple months. Let us know what changes.
For sure. And going forward into a digital-based society where, you know, less and less people are going to college, I really think it's important for people in Gen Z, people who are earlier in their 20s, to find new ways to add community to their lives. So if you guys have any, good suggestions of good communities people can join, not just religious communities, but if you think it's beneficial to join like a book club or some kind of thing like at a local community center, something like that, where you found enlightenment and found the ability to cultivate new relationships, let us know, because I think that's something I've struggled with a lot as well. And I'm sure that everyone could benefit for new ways to cultivate relationships from a righteous standpoint. Because I personally would, and I would love to find new ways to meet people in better places than just on the phone. Don't just use Instagram. Don't just use dating apps to solve all your problems of not being able to effectively communicate with people. Build those from natural standpoints and let us know how you're using, some good ones in your community to develop your skill set. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you got this far in the video, we really appreciate it, and we would love to see you leave a like on this video. Let us know down in the comments below what you want to see next, and make sure to smash the post notifications so you never miss another banger. From everybody at the Untouched Value Podcast, we'll see you in the next one.
Doses, brother.